He walked into that diner like a storm, ready to confront, to break, to burn down any memory that tied him to that place. But everything collapsed the second he saw the waitress, exhausted, steady, holding her little girl in her arms. The anger he brought with him didn't find an enemy. It found a mirror. And in that moment, the most feared CEO in the region realized he hadn't come back for revenge, but for something he never had the courage to face. The parking lot at Rosie's Diner was almost empty when the black Mercedes screeched to a stop, taking up 2 spaces. It was nearly 10 at night, and Seattle's cold fog was starting to swallow the streets of the working-class neighborhood. Inside the car, Marcus Hale took a slow breath, his knuckles white from gripping the wheel too hard. He had come back, and he shouldn't have. 3 days ago, a deal that took months to build had fallen apart. Millions gone. Furious investors. His reputation, for the first time in 15 years, questioned. And all because of a decision shaped by something that happened in that insignificant place. A roadside diner he had visited only once, by chance, on a random afternoon. But it hadn't been just any afternoon. Marcus stepped out of the car with his jaw clenched. His Italian shoes hit the cracked asphalt as he pushed through the glass door. The tiny bell above it chimed, slicing through the warm, sleepy quiet. The smell of old coffee and apple pie hung in the air. 3 scattered customers, a trucker in the corner, 2 teenagers sharing a milkshake. Fluorescent lights flickered over red vinyl booths worn down by time. And then he saw her. She was behind the counter, back turned, cleaning the coffee machine with tired, automatic motions. The faded pink uniform clung to her weary silhouette. Her curly hair, gathered in a loose bun, exposed the tension in her neck. She didn't hear him walk in. But she wasn't the one who froze Marcus in place. The child was. A little girl, 5, maybe 6 years old, slept curled up on a booth near the counter. Her cheek was pressed against her folded arm, dark curls falling over her face. A worn unicorn backpack served as a pillow. A sketchbook lay open beside her, crayons scattered everywhere. Marcus stopped. He had rehearsed the speech the entire drive, crafted every sharp word, every irrefutable argument. He was going to demand answers. Confront the woman who had unknowingly destroyed months of work with one casual conversation he overheard, a comment that made him rethink everything, and by rethinking, lose everything. But standing there, looking at that painfully simple scene, a tired mother, a daughter sleeping in an empty diner because they probably had nowhere else to be, something inside him cracked. The waitress turned around, grabbing a clean cloth, and finally saw him. Her brown eyes widened slightly, not in surprise, in recognition, and then, quickly, in warning. "We're closing," she said, her voice firm but low, careful not to wake the girl. Marcus stood still. The anger was still there, boiling under the surface, but now it blended with something he couldn't even name. Discomfort, embarrassment, maybe even shame. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice coming out harsher than he meant. She tossed the cloth onto the counter, crossed her arms, and lifted her chin. There was something fierce in that gesture. Not fear, defense. About what? About that conversation we had 3 days ago. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't answer right away, just studied him, the way someone studies a threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. But Marcus saw the lie in the way she glanced away for half a second. He took a step forward. She took half a step back, instinctively protecting the space between him and the sleeping child. "You do know," Marcus insisted, voice low and controlled, "and because of what you said, I lost a $20 million deal." Silence. The little girl shifted in her sleep, letting out a soft sigh. They both froze and looked at her, and in that instant, that fragile, weightless instant, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hesitation. Aisha Jenkins didn't take her eyes off him. She knew his type. Perfect suit, rigid posture, locked jaw. The type of man who walked into a place like this, expecting the world to bend for him. She'd seen plenty like that. Some left big tips to make up for the arrogance. Others didn't even bother. But this one was different. He had come back, and men like him didn't come back to Rosie's Diner without a reason. "Look, I don't know what conversation you think we had," she said, keeping her tone steady, controlled. "But I serve dozens of customers every day. If I said something that bothered you, it wasn't on purpose." Marcus took another step. Not threatening, but firm, resolute. It wasn't an accident. You asked what I did. I told you about my deal. You said it sounded way too risky, that companies that grow too fast tend to collapse overnight. Ring a bell now. Aisha felt her stomach tighten. She remembered. She remembered perfectly. It had been a slow afternoon. He'd been sitting alone at the counter, tapping on his laptop, clearly stressed. She had tried to be friendly, to spark small talk, like she always did. Never imagined those throwaway words would hold any weight. I was just making conversation, she said, her voice lower now, almost defensive. It wasn't meant to be taken seriously, but I did take it seriously, and you were right. His tone changed. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was deeper, frustration, maybe even desperation. Aisha glanced at Mia, still asleep in the booth. Her daughter was everything. The reason she woke at 5 every morning, worked double shifts, endured rude customers and aching feet. Anything that threatened their stability, however fragile, needed to be shut down. I'm sorry you lost money, she said, crossing her arms tighter, raising that invisible wall again. But I can't be blamed for that. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about business. I don't even know why you're here. I don't either, Marcus admitted, and for the first time, his voice wavered. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect cut. He suddenly looked smaller, less imposing, just tired. I spent 3 days trying to understand how a random comment from a stranger managed to knock me off balance like that, he said, almost talking to himself. And I came back because I needed an answer. I needed to understand why your words kept echoing in my head when nothing else mattered. Aisha didn't answer, just watched him, trying to figure out if this was manipulation or honesty. She was too tired to gamble. You need to leave, she said firmly. My daughter's asleep. I need to close up and take her home. I can't stay here arguing about business decisions that aren't my problem. I know, Marcus said, but he didn't move. Silence pressed between them. The low hum of the fridge. A distant car sliding down the wet street. Then movement. Mia opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the lights. She rubbed her face with her tiny hands, yawned, and sat up in the booth. Her brown eyes, still foggy with sleep, fell directly on Marcus. And then she smiled. It wasn't a shy smile. It was open, curious, unfiltered. The kind only a child can give. No judgment, no fear, no history. Hi, she said, her voice soft and sleepy. Marcus froze, completely, as if that smile had disarmed every wall he'd built on his way in. Hey, he answered, barely audible. Aisha's heart skipped, not because she feared the man, but because she feared the connection she'd just seen spark between her daughter and a stranger who had the power to ruin everything. Mia, come here, she called, extending a hand. But Mia was already up, dragging her unicorn backpack, walking toward the counter with light steps. And Marcus, for the first time since he entered that diner, had no idea what to say. Mia climbed onto the spinning counter stool like she did that every day, because she did. That diner was her second home, sometimes the only place she could be close to her mom while Aisha worked. You're tall, Mia observed, tilting her head as she studied Marcus with pure, innocent curiosity. Marcus blinked, completely undone. He had led meetings with billionaire investors, negotiated international contracts, faced hostile boards without flinching, but a 6-year-old had just left him speechless. Yeah, I am, he said, almost like he was apologizing. Mia, not now. Aisha stepped in, hurrying around the counter to grab her daughter, but Mia was already excited, her eyes bright with that genuine kid curiosity for anything new. Do you work with Mommy? Mia asked, ignoring her mother's attempt to pull her away. No, Marcus hesitated, searching for simple words. I came to talk to her. About what? Aisha took Mia's arm gently but firmly. Mia, enough. The gentleman is leaving now. But Marcus looked at the little girl and something inside him softened. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way she looked at him without fear, without expectations, without the layers of calculation and self-interest wrapped around every adult interaction in his world. It was just real. I came to ask your mom if she remembers a conversation we had, he said, crouching slightly so he was eye level with Mia, and if she does, whether she can help me understand something. Mia nodded, suddenly serious, like it all made perfect sense. Mom's good at helping. She always helps me with my homework. Marcus felt a strange tightness in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. He saw in that child an unshakable trust in her mother, the kind of bond he'd never had with anyone. "I'm sure she is," Marcus said quietly. Aisha pulled Mia back, placing herself between her daughter and Marcus. Her posture was clear. Protection. It didn't matter who he was or how much money he'd lost. In this space, she was the guardian, and he was the intruder. "Mia, grab your things. We're leaving," Aisha ordered, her voice firm but controlled. "But I wanted to show him my drawing," Mia protested, pointing to the notebook still on the booth. "No, please, Mommy. Just real quick." Aisha took a deep breath. She was exhausted. Too exhausted to argue. Too exhausted to explain why that man couldn't be part of their lives. Not even for 5 minutes. "Fine. One drawing. Just one. Then we're going." Mia ran to the booth, grabbed the notebook and hurried back, flipping to a page with a colorful drawing of a house, a tree, and 2 stick figures. One big, one small. "That's me and Mommy," Mia explained, pointing with her finger. "We live in a small apartment, but one day we're going to have a real house, with a yard, and a dog." Marcus looked at the drawing. Simple, childish, imperfect, and somehow devastating, because he'd had all of that. The house, the yard, the dog, and he couldn't remember ever actually being happy. "That's a beautiful drawing," he said, realizing his voice had dropped, rough around the edges. Mia smiled, pleased with herself, then did something no one expected. She tore the page carefully from the notebook, folded it, and held it out to Marcus. "You can keep it, so you remember that everybody deserves a real home." Marcus took the folded paper like it was something sacred. He looked at Aisha, who was visibly tense, her eyes shining with something between anger and fear. "Thank you," he murmured to Mia, and then, for the first time since walking into that diner, Marcus realized he wasn't there because of anger. He was there because something inside him had been broken for a long time, and that child, without knowing it, had just touched the crack. Aisha saw it. She saw the shift in his face, and that scared her more than any threat. Marcus held the folded drawing between his fingers like it was the only solid thing in a world that had lost its balance. He couldn't take his eyes off those 2 stick figures, mother and daughter, standing together, smiling under a yellow sun scribbled in the corner of the page. Aisha watched every move he made, every small change in his expression, trying to figure out what was going on. This man had walked in furious, ready to confront her, to pin on her the blame for something she barely remembered saying, and now he stood there holding a kid's drawing like it was the most important thing he'd ever touched. "I need to sit down," Marcus said suddenly, his voice drained. Aisha hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to send him away, lock the door, keep Mia far from any trouble this man might bring. But there was something in his expression, something she recognized because she saw it in the mirror every day. Exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying too much weight for way too long. "Sit," she said, gesturing to one of the stools near the counter. Marcus sat slowly, like even his bones hurt. Mia, always curious, climbed onto the stool next to him, her legs swinging back and forth. "Are you sad?" Mia asked, with that brutal honesty only kids have. Marcus looked at her, tried to smile. Couldn't. "A little, yeah." "Why?" "Mia," Aisha warned. "It's okay," Marcus cut in, raising a hand. He looked at Mia, then at Aisha, and finally let his guard drop. "I came here angry, thinking I needed answers, thinking someone had sabotaged me. But the truth is," he paused, searching for the words, "the truth is I was already broken before I ever stepped in here the first time." Aisha crossed her arms, still standing, still on guard, but listening. "That deal I lost," Marcus went on, his voice quieter now, like he was talking more to himself than to them. "It wasn't just about money. It was about proving something, proving I was good enough, that I was in control, that I could build an empire and never again be that kid no one saw, the one who didn't matter." He drew a breath, squeezing the folded drawing. "My father was a CEO, successful, respected, cold. I grew up in a huge house with everything money could buy, except attention, except affection. He thought preparing me for the world meant making me hard, teaching me that feelings were weakness, that people were pieces on a board." Aisha felt something shift inside her, not quite compassion, but understanding. the kind of understanding that comes from recognizing someone else's pain because you know your own. When he died, he left the company to me, and I spent 15 years proving I was better than him, tougher, more focused, more successful. But the truth? Marcus lifted his eyes, and they were red. The truth is, I turned into exactly what he was, and I hate it. Mia tilted her head, taking it in. Do you have kids? She asked. Marcus shook his head. No. Why not? He swallowed hard. Because I was afraid I'd treat them the way my dad treated me. Silence. A heavy silence, full of truths people almost never say out loud. Aisha moved closer and sat on the stool across the counter, finally letting a bit of the tension in her shoulders go. I get being scared, she said, her voice soft but steady. I'm scared every day. Scared I'm not enough, that I won't give Mia what she deserves, that I'll mess up. But the difference is, I don't have a choice. I wake up and fight, because she needs me. Marcus looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, he saw the dark circles under her eyes, the calluses on her hands, the worn-out uniform, and he saw strength, the kind he never had. You said I was right. About your deal, Aisha reminded him. But you didn't come back here just because of that, did you? Marcus shook his head slowly. No. I came back because for the first time in years, someone made me stop, made me question things. And I realized I don't even know who I am when I'm not working. When I'm not proving something. Mia reached out and touched his arm, a simple, gentle gesture. You can be our friend? She offered, smiling. And Marcus, for the first time in a very long time, felt something he didn't quite know how to name anymore. Hope. Marcus looked at the folded drawing still in his hand. Those simple lines, drawn by a kid who barely knew how to write her own name, had done something 15 years of corporate therapy, leadership retreats, and motivational coaches never had. They cracked the shell. He carefully unfolded the paper, smoothing the creases on the counter. Mia watched, proud to see her drawing treated with so much care. Aisha stayed quiet, still processing everything this man had just revealed. I was 7, Marcus began, his voice low, almost a whisper. My mom had just left home. Divorce. My dad got custody because he had more money, better lawyers. She didn't stand a chance. He ran his finger over the smaller stick figure in the drawing, the child next to the mother. I made a drawing for her, kind of like this one. Me and her, in a new house far away from him. I kept it in my backpack to give her on visitation day, but my father found it first. He tore it up right in front of me, said I needed to stop being weak, that men don't draw, don't dream. Men build empires. His voice broke. Aisha felt her chest tighten. Mia, even if she didn't fully understand, sensed the hurt and scooted closer, pressing her little arm against his. He ripped your drawing? Mia asked, outraged. That's really mean. Marcus let out a humorless laugh, but there was warmth in it, thanks to her indignation. Yeah, it was really mean. And your mom? Aisha asked softly. Did you ever see her again? Marcus shook his head. She tried. For years. But my dad blocked everything, said she was unstable, that she'd mess me up. When I got older, more independent, it was too late. I'd convinced myself he was right, that she'd abandoned me, that I didn't need anybody. He lifted his gaze to Aisha, and there were tears there, held back by sheer will. She died 3 years ago, cancer. I found out through a distant cousin. I didn't go to the funeral, because I was still angry at her for leaving. Angry at myself for never going after her. Angry at my father for turning me into his copy. Aisha closed her eyes for a brief moment. She knew that kind of pain, the pain of carrying regrets you can't fix anymore. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. Marcus looked back down at Mia's drawing, then did something that surprised even him. He started to cry. Not the discreet, controlled kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, buried for decades, finally finding a way out. Mia didn't hesitate. She wrapped her little arms around his. Don't cry, she said, with a child's simple wisdom. You can make another drawing, a new one, different. Marcus laughed through the tears, squeezing the small hand holding his arm. You're right, kiddo. You're absolutely right. Aisha stood, grabbed a paper napkin, and handed it to him. Marcus took it, wiping his face, trying to pull himself together. But something had changed for good. The mask had cracked, and he didn't want to fix it anymore. "I didn't come here to blame you," he admitted, finally meeting Aisha's eyes. "I came because I was lost. And somehow, without knowing it, you gave me permission to question everything, to stop pretending everything was fine." Aisha nodded slowly. "And now, what are you going to do?" Marcus took a deep breath. He looked around the diner, the old chairs, the flickering lights, the scratched counter, and he saw beauty there, saw truth, saw something his world of steel and glass had never given him: humanity. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but for the first time in a long time I want to find out. Not as a CEO, not as my father's son, just as Marcus." Mia clapped her hands like he'd just made the most obvious, sensible choice in the world. "You can come here again," she offered proudly. "Mommy makes the best hot chocolate." Aisha looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, and for the first time since he'd walked into that diner, she smiled. A small smile, careful but real. "We close in 15 minutes, she said, "but if you want a hot chocolate before you go, I think we've got time." Marcus smiled back, a real smile, cracked but full of gratitude. "I'd love that." Aisha made 3 mugs of hot chocolate. One for Mia, topped with whipped cream and the leftover sprinkles from the afternoon shift. One for herself, simple, no extra sugar. The day had already been sweet enough. And one for Marcus, made with the quiet care of someone who still didn't fully know what to make of him, but chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. Marcus held the mug between his hands, feeling the warmth seep through the worn porcelain. Mia slurped loudly beside him, legs swinging on the tall stool, blissfully unaware of the emotional weight hanging in the air. "It's good," Marcus said, and he wasn't just talking about the chocolate. Aisha leaned against the counter watching him. There was something different about him now. His posture was still upright, but no longer rigid. His shoulders seemed lighter. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now held a vulnerability she recognized, the vulnerability of someone who finally allowed himself to feel after years of living numb. "You really lost $20 million because of something I said?" she asked, still trying to grasp the scale of it. Marcus let out a low laugh, almost ironic. "Technically, I refused to close the deal. The money was sitting there, waiting. But after talking to you, after hearing you say that companies that grow too fast usually crash overnight, I actually took a real look at the proposal, and I saw every red flag I'd been ignoring out of pride, out of pressure, out of fear of looking weak." He took another sip of the hot chocolate. "So yeah, I lost the money, but I probably saved a lot more in the long run, and more importantly, I saved myself from becoming exactly what I feared most." Aisha nodded slowly, letting that settle. She had never imagined her casual words could hit someone that hard. She never had that kind of power in her mind. She was just a woman trying to survive, being kind when she could, honest when asked. "And now?" she asked. "You gonna go back and build another empire?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, looking at the folded drawing sitting beside his mug. "I don't know. Maybe. But not the way I used to. Not at the cost of everything else. Not at the cost of myself." He glanced at Mia, who was now drawing something new on a paper napkin with a borrowed pen. "You know what's funny? I've spent my whole life building things. Buildings, companies, fortunes, and none of it ever made me feel what I felt when your daughter handed me that drawing. That was real. That was generous. That was human." Aisha felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not attraction. Not yet. Not like that. Recognition. The recognition that sometimes the most broken people are the ones most desperate for a scrap of humanity. "Mia has that gift," she said softly. "She sees people, for real, not what they have, not what they pretend to be, just who they are." Marcus smiled, a genuine smile, touched by that simple truth. "She's lucky to have you as her mom." Aisha shook her head, humble. "I'm lucky to have her. She reminds me every day why it's worth waking up, why it's worth fighting." They sat in silence for a moment, simply existing in that shared space. There were no promises, no magical fixes. Marcus wasn't going to solve Aisha's financial struggles. She wasn't going to fix his trauma. But there was something far more valuable between them that night: connection. Mia finished her drawing on the napkin and slid it toward Marcus. "This one's for you, too, so you don't forget." Marcus looked down. It was a big, uneven heart, scribbled with blue ink, and inside, 3 shaky little words. Você é legal. You're nice. His eyes stung again, but this time he didn't try to hide it. Thank you, Mia. I'm gonna keep this forever. Aisha began collecting the mugs, a quiet signal that it was really time to close. Marcus stood, reached for his wallet, and left a few bills on the counter, far more than the price of 3 hot chocolates. It's not to make up for anything, he said before Aisha could protest. It's just gratitude. Aisha took the money, nodded silently. You can come back, she said, surprising herself. If you want. No pressure. No expectations. Marcus smiled. I'd like that. He crouched to Mia's height and extended his hand. It was a pleasure meeting you, little artist. Mia shook his hand solemnly, then pulled him into a fast, tight hug. Bye, Marcus. He walked out of Rosie's diner with both drawings folded in his jacket pocket. The black Mercedes was still there, imposing and cold. But when Marcus got inside, he didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, in the quiet, feeling that for the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was walking toward something new, and somehow, it all made sense. Sometimes, what looks like an inevitable confrontation is just life calling you back to meet your own essence. If this story touched you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that speak straight to the heart. In the comments, tell us, have you ever had a simple conversation that completely changed your perspective? We read everything. See you next time.